Hello, and welcome to this new video. Today, we are presenting a very special interview with Josef Pretzl, a former civil engineer and construction manager who was involved in the construction of the underground bunker systems on the Obersalzberg during the final years of the Second World War. Pretzl worked on several important underground projects in the area, including the SS bunker system and the extensive Platterhof bunker complex beneath the former hotel grounds. After long and difficult research, the BEGAFILM team located Josef Pretzl in 1991. At the time, he was already 85 years old. Together with a camera team, he returned to the Obersalzberg for the first time since 1945 and descended once again into the tunnels and rooms where he had once worked as an engineer. This interview offers a rare first-hand account from one of the men who was directly involved in the construction of these underground facilities. And now, let's let Josef tell his story.
First, Hitler's bunker was built, and then Bormann said that he needed protection for his people. And from then on, it kept going further and further, becoming larger and larger, with new sections constantly being added. At first, this was also for the people at the Platterhof, whose number kept increasing, and they needed more and more space. Again and again, a new tunnel was blasted out and then lined with concrete. The SS company was responsible for carrying out the field work and the blasting operations, and we, the mall company, carried out the remaining finishing work with our work crew. We worked in 2 shifts, 10 hours a day. 1 hour was spent on transport there and back. The night shift was brought in, and the day shift was taken back to the camp. And in the morning, the bunker soup arrived, which also took half an hour. So, on average, each shift worked 10 hours. We had to make sure that all the material needed for the construction work was brought in. We had to order things, the bricks, the cement, the gravel, and everything else that was needed for the construction. Then, we had to prepare the formwork. A special system had to be invented for how best to build it, so that it could be moved again and again from one completed section to the next. Each section was about 5 meters long, roughly the distance between 2 supports. Between them, wooden formwork was placed onto the supports, and then the concrete was poured into it. There were no plans available, because everything was secret. You always had to keep asking how things were supposed to continue. Then they added another tunnel because the available space was not enough for the people who were there. For the Platterhof tunnel, a huge machine room was excavated and lined with concrete. Then a small diesel engine was installed there, which we had just managed to get inside before the bombing raid came, and also a large diesel engine, which was assembled on site. This large diesel engine was supposed to supply the entire complex with electricity. The Platterhof, the guest house, the SS barracks, and the Berghof. The concrete mixing plant was set up in front of the tunnel, in front of the auxiliary tunnel. Then a shaft was sunk from the Platterhof tunnel down to the SS tunnel, and it was supposed to continue onto the Berghof tunnel. The cross vault was created because 2 tunnel extensions crossed each other there. That is why the cross vault had to be installed. The theater hall had collapsed in the winter of 1943 because of the pressure from the snow. The company, the RG, was then commissioned to rebuild it. And because there was so much snow, they could not finish the work because they were constantly clearing snow. They removed the snow, and by the time they were ready, it had snowed again. They simply could not get around to building. Schenck then commissioned the mall company to take over the work. And we did not remove the snow. Instead, we simply threw it down into the basement, beneath the floor, and then instructed the main office to prepare the construction plans. Everything was reinforced because the trusses that had been there before were not stable enough. They had all collapsed. That is why the trusses were made twice as strong. By the time we were really able to start working, about 3 weeks had passed, because all the plans and calculations first had to be prepared. Then carpenters were brought in from all over the region, and Schenck put pressure on everyone, saying that it had to be finished in the shortest possible time. So we worked day and night as far as possible, including Sundays and public holidays, even on Whit Sunday and Whit Monday. After about 2 months, the whole structure had been erected.
We have a special guest here today at the Obersalzberg, Engineer Pretzl. Engineer Pretzl was in charge of construction management for what was then the most important bunker complex on the Obersalzberg, and also the most complicated one, namely the Platterhof, the guest house, and the SS tunnel system. Mr. Pretzl, how long were you here on this mountain altogether?
I was here until the end of the war, from October 1943 until April 1945.
So, you experienced the entire bunker construction from the very beginning, and it will certainly be very interesting now, 50 years later, to go down into the bunkers with you once again and have you explain to us, on site, what happened there. Mr. Pretzl, what kind of room was this back then?
This was the first one to be completed. It was the cavern for the kitchen.
Okay, so this was the kitchen. Were you able to provide for yourselves here?
No, this was exclusively for the guests of the guest house.
For the guests of the guest house. And the first thing they needed in the bunker was a kitchen?
Yes, exactly. That is why this was also the first one to be completed.
So this was the very first thing that was completed in the entire tunnel system. Did you have anything to do with the interior work and the equipment, or was that entirely handled by the Obersalzberg administration?
That was handled by the administration. They did everything themselves. They had their own electricians who installed all of it.
Was that a storage room or a warehouse back there?
Yes, but they divided all of that up themselves. We built the tunnel as one continuous structure. Then the people from the administration separated off an area the way they wanted it.
How was the bunker soup organized?
The bunker soup was brought here by truck from the kitchen, from the camp. And then there was a long table down here in the tunnel. The kettles were placed on it. Then the kitchen helpers were there, mostly foreign women, usually French women, and they handed everything out. I usually divided up the meat so that it was fair and equal. When the cavern was completed, it was immediately locked by the SS men. They were housed up there in the guest house.
Gästehaus, EU hat zusammen das Sagen vom Gästehaus. Der Berliner hat immer reingekommen.
Back then, important documents were stored down here. But after that, you had nothing more to do with them, did you?
No, I had nothing more to do with them after that.
This tunnel, for example, was it built according to the normal standard specifications?
Yes, it must be 3 meters and 50 centimeters wide.
So it is 3 meters 50. And the heating pipes were still integrated into the walls by you?
Yes, exactly. That was done by us. And down here, the pipes were laid. The shafts were also built by us, as well as the pipes. They were Eternit pipes. There was also a separate company responsible for the exhaust air system. But I no longer remember what it was called.
Mr. Pretzl, this door is locked today. Behind it there is a dangerous shaft that leads 25 to 30 meters down into the depths. Back then, you were the senior construction manager of this project. What do you know about this shaft?
It was blasted out by the tunnel construction company. They worked on it day and night, with the aim that we could use it as a staircase to go up and down. Why they made it so large, I do not know. There were no plans available. Everything was passed on by word of mouth. Here we have some remains left behind by our electrician. The cables for our construction lamps were attached to them.
Mr. Pretzl, we are now in a section where the different construction stages can still be seen. Here, on the left and right, we have the bricks. Back there we have the rough excavation, which was not done by you, but by the SS Tunnel Construction Company. In some cases, it was even the case that shortly after the SS had left a construction section, you immediately moved in with your crew and began your work. Could you explain to us which tunnel this is and how the handover between the different stages of work took place?
So first, the tunnel construction company was here and began breaking out the rock. This here was supposed to become the exit to the guest house. And then we followed with our equipment, our tools, and our material, and continued with the interior construction work. How we would construct the formwork, how it could be moved again, and so on.
Who gave you the plans for this formwork?
We had to start making the formwork plans ourselves.
And the plans for the construction of the bunker complex itself?
Those were made by the State Construction Department. That was Mr. Staub. He had been loaned to the State Construction Department by the company Sager and Romer because they did not have enough people, and he then prepared the plans. I received them from him.
So you received the plans and then put them into practice?
Yes, I then had to prepare the formwork plans. That was not included in the original plans. They had to be designed in such a way that we had a brace at the bottom and a brace at the top so that the space in between remained free. That way people could work there and lay the tracks. For the trolley wagons, we call them tunnel dogs. The cement, the stones, the bricks, all of that was brought down with the trolley wagons.
Were there also injuries involving these trolley wagons? Were they pushed by hand or operated mechanically?
From top to bottom, they were lowered on a cable. And down below, once it became level, they were pushed by hand by the workers.
According to your statement, there were technical construction problems in this tunnel that had a major impact on the building costs. What exactly happened there?
The rock that was supposed to be above us was not rock at all, but heavily compressed gravel. Of course, it did not hold, and again pieces fell down and broke away. A very large dome-like space was created because of all the material that had broken out. And once we had finished the formwork, the entire cavity naturally had to be filled back up with concrete. That was a very difficult task.
And in the end, how did you get the concrete up there?
We had to do it by hand with buckets. There was no other way. A section was always formed up first, then we waited until the concrete had hardened, and then the next section was done.
So this was a very difficult and costly job in this tunnel. Mr. Pretzl, we are now in the largest room in this bunker complex. What was this room called back then?
This was the machine room. The 2 diesel generators were installed here.
Can you tell us more details about the diesel engines?
There was one diesel engine, the smaller one, which was delivered fully assembled. It had been standing outside at the guest house. From there, we transported it into the tunnel shortly before the bombing raid. The large diesel engine was assembled on site by 2 mechanical engineers from the company MAN Augsburg.
You had told us that behind this room, another chamber was built for diesel reserves. Do you know whether diesel fuel was ever brought into the bunker, or was that no longer possible because of the war situation?
I am not aware of anything other than the diesel engine being installed.
Did you have any difficulties during the construction of this large hall?
Yes, the difficulty was connecting the insulation of this high ceiling with that of the lower ceiling. This had to be leveled out with concrete so that no cavity would be created.
All the electrical wires and cables were led from here over into the electrical room. You said that the electrical room had a lower ceiling than this room. How was this problem solved?
We had to work with formwork there. You had to figure out how to shape it so that the transition was smooth, without corners or edges. No corner was supposed to be created. Everything had to be clean and smooth so that the insulation would not crack.
Mr. Pretzl, we are now in the room with the distinctive cross vault. How did it happen that a cross vault was created in a bunker that was only intended for air raid protection?
Originally, only a single cavern was planned, running all the way through here. But because more and more people were being housed here at the Obersalzberg and needed space in the bunkers, 2 additional cross tunnels were built. That is how this cross vault came into being.
How was it built? With formwork?
Yes, it was built with formwork, with an elliptical arch onto which the wooden boards were then placed. Intermediate arches were also installed between them. All of that had to be specially made. And then the insulation was applied as well. After that, the facing masonry was built, which again required its own formwork.
So it was very complicated.
Yes, very complicated.
So 2 additional side tunnels were built afterwards. This was done because the Platterhof Hotel, which had been converted into a military hospital, was filling up with more and more patients. When there was an air raid alarm, and that happened quite often, did the people from the Platterhof regularly come down here and seek shelter?
Yes, they regularly came down here. On this side, there were several chests and crates, and they would sit on them. This here was the entrance tunnel for our material. Concrete, stones, bricks, and everything else that was needed were brought in here. Wooden formwork, and so on, all of it was brought in through here. The concrete mixer stood up above. That is where the concrete was mixed. The mixer had a cable winch. With this cable winch, the wagons were pulled up. Most of the time, it was only one wagon. Then the wagon was filled with concrete, and with the help of the winch, it was lowered back down again. Down here, the workers then transported the material to wherever it was needed. We even had a turntable for the mine railway down here.
Did you constantly supervise the construction from down here, or did you have an office somewhere on the surface?
Yes, I had an office. It stood up there, near the tea house. We also had our workshop there, our carpentry workshop, where we prepared the arches and the formwork. Also, the elliptical arches for the cross vault.
The tunnel looks quite narrow from here. Back then, it was supported with wood on the left and right. Was it so narrow that you could still walk alongside the wagon? Or was that not possible?
It was quite narrow, so no, that was not possible.
Were there ever any injuries under your supervision? Or did anything ever collapse here?
Not that I know of.
How many men worked here roughly under your command?
I would estimate about 80 men. There were 2 shifts, around 40 men per shift. The carpenters and painters were all Germans, as were the foremen and the site supervisors. All the others were from abroad. Many were Italians.
Were forced laborers ever used at the Obersalzberg, or prisoners of war?
Not to my knowledge.
Were these workers paid normally?
They were paid normally.
With bonuses? I mean tunnel bonuses or depth bonuses?
It may well be that they received something like that, but I do not know for certain.
The machine gun positions that were supposed to be installed here, this is one of them. Was it also your task to build the masonry for those? And who gave the specifications for the whole thing?
That came from the construction management. Just like the armor plates and armored doors.
Did Bormann, who was greatly feared among the workers and people up here, ever come down into this tunnel for an inspection and inform himself about the whole project?
Not while I was here. I never saw him.
Yes, it was already quite late by then, so he was probably not at the Obersalzberg most of the time. But his deputy, Mr. Schenk?
Yes, Schenk came here quite often and looked at it. And also the construction supervisors. I no longer remember their names. Peter Scheck was one of them.
Was a lot of pressure put on you?
There was always pressure to work day and night.
Thank you very much for watching this interview with Josef Pretzl, one of the few people who could still give a first-hand account of the bunker construction on the Obersalzberg. His memories give us a rare insight into the construction, organization, and technical challenges behind the underground tunnel systems, places that, even decades later, still raise many questions. If you found this interview interesting, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell so you do not miss any future documentaries, interviews, and rare historical footage from our archive. And of course, feel free to write your thoughts, questions, or additional information in the comments below. We are always interested in your feedback and in hearing what you would like to see in future uploads. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.